everyone. Welcome to our May Abortion Healing Provider webinar. We are so grateful that you have decided to spend your lunch hour with us. We have an incredible panel today. We have Melissa Oden with the Abortion Survivors Network, Missy Martinez-Stone with Reprotection, Michelle Lawler with Hugs Over Ginger, and Britt Paladino with Abiding Love Adoptions. I'm just going to do some quick housekeeping with you all. The first thing I want to share with you is that you should feel very comfortable using the chat feature in this meeting. This is going to be a great way for you to communicate questions that you have, and especially for you to share with us where you're coming from, what your background is, what this means to you. So please use that feature as you need to. Members of our team may interact with you. And at the end of this meeting, we'll have a chance for everyone to get some questions answered. And that might seem really scary to you. So there's two ways that you can ask a question. The first way is to type it in the chat. The second way is for you to just come on camera and just ask the panelists that you want to chat with a little bit about what it is your question is. So we'll use the raise hands feature and enable that at the very end of our conversation today. So welcome everyone. We continue to be so grateful for the work that you're doing in the mission field. And we wanted to share a little bit about our why for having this meeting today. And as I was praying and reflecting about this meeting this morning, I was thinking so much about the blessing that I have to be in a church community that had a Lenten mission of simplify and unify. And our pastor brought this mission to us because we were very busy. And we were not the good kind of busy. You know what I mean? You know, that good kind of busy versus the not so good, unhealthy kind of busy. That busyness was being felt across our community, especially in ways that we were duplicating work. We were not all operating with good communication. And there were multiple things about which things that were happening in our community that were all good, but not collaborative, not efficient, not unity, not simple. And so he challenged us to the Lenten objective of unify and simplify. And you know what year it was? 2020. So we very much unified and simplified across COVID together, simplified our lives in terms of how much freedom we had to travel, simplified our lives in terms of the ability to meet in person, to gather in church community. And our lives were really able to focus on what was the most important thing. And so we gather this panel with you today because we know that we need each other to serve clients in the best way possible. We know that we're not Walmarts, that we can't be everything to everyone at every moment. And we're so blessed to have collaboration across providers and across our healing partners who can speak into and step into spaces that are not our strong suit. And for that reason, we've gathered this panel today to talk about that opportunity for collaboration. So at the end of this meeting, what I'm hoping for you to do is to be able to tuck all of these providers into your back pocket and know when it is that you should engage them in conversation and invite them in to help or serve a particular client in need. The way that we're structuring this meeting today, we're just going to go through each provider at a time. I'm going to begin with Melissa Oden of the Abortion Survivors Network. Melissa, if you would be so kind to share a brief introduction to your organization and your why.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I have to apologize for the voice. My kids decided to share, and they don't often share snacks. They like to share their germs. So here we are. Many of you, I see so many names crossing through the chat, and I know many of you know me for, being a speaker in the pro-life movement, but what I hope my legacy is in the pro-life movement is what I've done with my story through the grace of God, really. I think people often are captured and captivated by my story, but I'm here today to really impart wisdom about what we do at the Abortion Survivors Network, and not just for adults like me who survived attempts to abort them as babies in the womb, but really our work that we are engaging in when it comes to women who are experiencing failed, stopped, and reversed abortions. And I would suspect many of you who are tuning in are seeing these women coming in through your centers. I'm hearing lots of stories lately of centers who are saying, hey, we're not even asking the question, but intake is hearing one story, ultrasound tech is hearing another, and people are starting to put two and two together to say, hey, listen, there's probably more to this woman's story than what she's telling us right now, and she's coming through the doors of our center. And I talked at Heartbeat about this as well. And I think, Kylie, you and I have talked about it. When it comes to even after abortion healing services, if you haven't already heard the story of a woman who experienced a failed, stopped, or reversed abortion, you are going to. And I think part of it is language. Kylie, you and I talk about that a lot as friends and fellow professionals, that, until we're talking from the same language and singing from the same song sheet, we are probably just not even scratching the surface of people's experiences. And I know for many people who are doing healing with women after abortion, we don't often know how to even broach the subject of a failed, stopped, or reversed abortion. So that is part of what we do. So yes, we offer healing support to adult survivors. I'll be in a community Zoom tonight with international abortion survivors. I get to be up at midnight, but that's going to help me make it to St. Louis tomorrow for a luncheon. All things will happen. But we don't just serve adults. We serve biological women who are raising their children after their attempts to abort them failed, or they stopped them, or it was reversed successfully. We come alongside adoptive parents. We just heard from another one yesterday who are parenting a 10-month-old who survived both chemical abortion pills. There are significant needs, and we've done a great job in the last 5 decades coming alongside women and men and starting to research, like you guys have done at Support After Abortion, about the impact of abortion. But what we haven't done is really know who is being impacted by failed, stopped, and reversed abortions. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to share what we're experiencing with everybody today.
So Melissa, our after abortion line, we're encountering women who have taken medication abortion frequently, and that woman finds out she has continued in her pregnancy, and she's facing that next fork in the road. Do I have another abortion, which will likely, for some women, require travel to another state to have that done, or do I continue to carry my pregnancy? How do you counsel women in that circumstance to make that second decision?
Yeah, and this is the new reality we're in. I mean, I was just texting a member of Congress and their staffer yesterday saying, hi, welcome to Born Alive Legislation 2.0. And we see things that we see policymakers and sometimes the abortion lobby and industry, and even on our side of the aisle, guys, like, we are the people who are seeing it happen. So I'm here to encourage you and say, you know more about what's happening than a lot of the people who are making decisions, okay? So that is a gift that we are given to serve people with vulnerable stories. But I know that there's a real heaviness to that. And what I can tell you is women who are experiencing their chemical abortions failing are in incredible crisis. This is not what they are told to expect. Right? They were told that this problem was going to go away. And so there is so much stress, so much crisis. And Kylie, you got to see me kind of walking through that even with someone. And I talked about this at Heartbeat. We have to be so understanding that this is not a time to come alongside a woman and say, what a miracle. Congratulations. No, that we may not ever get there, right? What she needs to hear you say is, oh my gosh, this must be so overwhelming. You're probably shocked right now. What can I do to support you? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Anything you're going through is normal. It's going to be different from day to day. But we have to really, in my experience, we need to assess the situation, right? What was driving her to the abortion in the first place? So we need to assess what that was and determine whether that is still an issue. Chances are it usually is, because when you think about it with chemical abortions, They are learning very quickly that they're pregnant, and they're being told by our culture, stockpile your chemical abortion pills, be afraid. And so women have these at their disposal. They're taking them very quickly early on in a pregnancy. We're hearing at 2 weeks, women are taking them, and they're learning very quickly that they're not experiencing the symptoms they're told that they were going to. And so they're deep diving, looking for answers. And that's when you are probably starting to hear from them. Pregnancy centers, you might start to see them. They're reaching out to us directly saying, tell me the truth. What did I just do? And their reasons for reaching out to us might be a little different than why they're reaching out to you. They reach out to us to say, you are the only people in this space talking about failed abortions. Tell me what I just did to my baby. And there's very limited research. You're going to see us putting out a lot of research in the next 6 months and then for the next 10 years to fill this huge gap that has existed. But they want truth. They need hope. We have to assess that whole situation. We need to address whatever crisis and the stress that they're under. And you don't have to have all the services. I think that's such an important point. But you need to know who to refer them to and help make those connections, especially in a place of crisis. They can't see the forest through the trees. And I can tell you that in our experience, those women, especially if they're connected with an OB, unless that is a pro-life OB, they are being counseled immediately for another abortion. A lot of times right now, we're finding that they're being told, go have another chemical abortion. And if that doesn't work, then you're going to have a follow-up surgical. And one woman in particular recently, she said to me, what if I go and have another chemical abortion and that one fails too? I mean, I can't keep doing this. And so we have to understand both where they are right now and where they are headed and the people who are likely influencing every one of those decisions. So assess even their informal supports, help address the gaps that exist in informal supports for them. That's where we come in. We provide one-on-one support through a clinical social worker. I'm actually going to be bringing on another social worker for that very reason. And we offer group support. So we do groups of biological moms who are pregnant right now. We have bio moms who are parenting survivors who range in age from infancy to, their parents of 30-year-olds. And then we have adoptive parents as well who are being supported. That is another subgroup. So assess it, address it, and reduce the stress that woman is under, because it's sky high.
That's so important. And I was able to witness you in person carry this conversation and remember to not celebrate this as a miracle. That was the first thing that I was like, oh, I wouldn't have immediately thought of holding back my own emotion in that circumstance. Is very important. One of the things that I'm so proud of you and in your work is that if we at support after abortion give a client to you who has a failed abortion, your care goes beyond that next step. It goes into, if they do decide to continue with that pregnancy, how they're going to parent and how they're going to recover and heal from the failed abortion. Would you speak to that for just one moment?
Yeah, I would be happy to. This is, again, one of those things where we haven't really scratched the surface of it in the pro-life movement. And if you would have told me when I started out on this journey 16 years ago that I would first see and serve the needs of survivors like me, I would have maybe said, yeah, maybe someday I was a clinical social worker. Sure, that makes sense. What I wouldn't have thought is, oh my gosh, Melissa, you are going to visibly see the needs of women like your biological mother and their need to have wraparound support long-term so that we can have improved parent-child bonding, so that women can walk through the shame and the guilt and the fear that doesn't end when the crisis is averted in pregnancy and they maybe carry that pregnancy, that they find out maybe in the ultrasound that baby looks healthy. When baby is born, those are points on the journey. They are not the final destination. And that's why this is long-term wraparound care, because when we think about even in our own lives, whether it's a child we've parented or a child we have in our lives who we love, I think we can all follow kind of the peaks and valleys that go in children's lives. And so then put yourself in the shoes of the woman who attempted to abort that child who survived. This is not, a green meadow where we get to just arrive and say, hurrah. No, think about when the child is born, how that affects the woman. We had a young lady contact us earlier this year who said, I thought I was fine after my baby survived my chemical abortion. And then I gave birth to her and I looked at her and I felt so ashamed. I feel so guilty. Help me. And so that is part of what we walk through. I have moms who call our hotline and will say, my surviving child is in their 30s. They live in my basement. We have this horrible relationship, right? Where we're battling, and the child, I feel like, they use me and I let them. And so then I've said to them, how long has this been going on, right? Talk to me about why you think this is happening. Well, at the end of the day, it's about the fact that they attempted to abort them. There is still shame, there is still guilt. And so they go in this, peak and valley of that relationship being that way. So, I mean, as hard as that can be sometimes, it's exciting to me because there's hope in the midst of that. Those are circumstances we can all enter into with them to have a dramatically different outcome in families.
Two things came up between us yesterday that led to just a wonderful conversation. I want you to briefly just share with me, what is the proper definition of failed abortion? What is the proper definition of abortion survivor?
Language is important. On our new website, you guys will see that we've kind of laid out some language. So if you haven't been to our revamped website, abortionsurvivors.org, we do have quite a bit of research. There's different paths that families can follow, that policymakers can follow, and we'll be adding more resources to that. But one of those burning questions, yes, Kylie, is who is an abortion survivor? And this is a sticky one, because for about 50 years, at least in the movement, we've used abortion survivor interchangeably for different situations. So I have friends whose mom considered aborting them, or maybe went to the abortion clinic and was so close to an abortion being performed. And those friends have called themselves abortion survivors. And that happens a lot. People will email us and say, I'm an abortion survivor. And we very carefully have to ask gracious questions saying, tell me about the abortion you survived. And people will go, oh, no. I didn't survive an abortion. I was almost aborted. Or I experienced an abortion. And so we have to say, thank you for acknowledging that. But an abortion survivor is literally a baby who survived an attempt to abort them. And that might be at home, it might be in a clinic, it might be in a hospital, it might have been before Roe, during Roe, after Roe, any gestation, any attempt to abort them. But that is specifically who an abortion survivor is. So we are babies who survived abortions. That's why you will see that language on our website. And it's hard, right, from a messaging standpoint, because we're adults, and that a lot of us now, and that's who people see. So we have to try to connect the dots on who an abortion survivor is. But that language is important because we live in a culture that tries to say that we don't exist, that failed, stopped, and reversed abortions don't happen. And so in many ways, we have to be very clear about who an abortion survivor is. And so for my friends who could have been aborted, who were very close to being aborted, the language that we use, that I know other friends use as well, is they were targeted for an abortion.
Thank you so much for that clarification. And our language matters so much. What I'd invite you to do, I see so many questions coming through in the chat. I want to share with you that when we share this recording, we're going to share it with a write-up that will convey all of Melissa's information that she has shared with you alongside her contact information, her website, and so on. So you will have that direct outreach. Now I'm going to ask Missy Martinez-Stone to talk to us about Reprotection. Thank you so much, Melissa, for sharing. Missy, would you share with us your a brief introduction to your organization and your why?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Missy Martinez-Stone. I'm the CEO of an organization called Reprotection, and we help hold the abortion facilities accountable for the harm that they cause the women in your community. And so as pregnancy center team members, as sidewalk advocates, you guys are on the front lines. You see and hear the behavior that's happening inside the abortion facility. You have clients that come to you and say, I had a terrible experience. You know, insert terrible explanation of terrible experience. And before Reprotection, there was never really a consistent and safe place to take that information and make sure that it was acted upon in a way that was client forward, that really put the woman's needs first. And so we partner with the pregnancy centers. We take that information, we get it into the hands of the authorities, and we make sure that they are held accountable for the harm that they cause. So this could look a lot. This looks like we had one abortion facility disciplined for having their office manager have the informed consent conversations, or it could be as grotesque as a woman running out of the facility screaming, call 911 because she had was afraid for her life. I mean, it ranges. I know if you're part of any of those ministries, you're already thinking of the stories that you've heard from those abortion facilities. So we take that information, we find out what law was violated, and then who was responsible for oversight, and make sure that abortion facilities are held accountable.
Thank you so much for sharing that in such a concise and beautiful way, Missy. One of the things that we're seeing on the after abortion line is that there are women who are having unsafe and traumatic experiences who, as part of their healing journey, they desire justice.
Yes.
And they don't feel like they have access to justice because perhaps the thing that led them to an abortion facility was that they didn't have the means to raise their child. So can you share with us, is there a cost to engaging Reprotection for help?
Yeah, so we are not attorneys. That what we do is not, we're not doing medical malpractice. This isn't civil litigation. A lot of times women who have been wronged, especially in these kinds of situations, the misunderstanding is that your only recourse is to sue somebody, and that is not the case. And lawsuits are expensive. They typically are traumatic for the victims themselves. They have to relive their experience. They have to go through depositions. It's a whole situation that most people are not wanting to or willing to go through. What we do is we go to the state agencies that are responsible for general medical regulation. So this is health departments, this is medical boards, these are different licensing boards, this is town zoning. And so really all we're doing is using the resources that the state has put in place for complaints. So it doesn't cost anything other than, you know, our time. We volunteer our time to these clients and say, okay, we will file a complaint with the health department. We'll follow it all the way through to make sure that you get justice for what happened to you. So it's a distinction from what most people think of when they think, oh, I was wrong, and it's a medical malpractice lawsuit. Well, it probably isn't. And there's a much easier, much lower standard that we can meet to ensure that these facilities are held accountable.
Tell us a little bit about some language and some protocols that are important when engaging Reprotection.
Yeah, especially for the pregnancy centers, if you are HIPAA compliant, we have a policy that we don't ever take information that was obtained illegally, and we do not want you to break HIPAA in the process of serving your client. And so the way that we train people to document the information is you can take some notes. We don't need pictures. People like to take pictures of like ambulances at facilities. We say we don't need it. We don't need it. It can feel very invasive to the woman going through a complication. If she looks out the ambulance window and there's a person, holding their phone, that feels very insensitive. And so everything that we do puts the client first. So if you're in a conversation with her at the pregnancy center or on the sidewalk and she starts opening up, you just ask questions. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Did something happen? Did you not feel prepared or heard or cared for in this process? Like, can we help you? And then when relaying that information to us, you can give us general information without breaking HIPAA. So please keep the patient's information private. Don't violate any rules when obtaining information about the abortion facility. Don't trespass onto property and dig through their dumpster. We don't need to do that. We have enough to go off of by just talking to the clients, hearing about their experience, and then you can say, hey, this is a trend I'm seeing. I've had a number of clients come to me and say they were put in a room with 10 other people and given the pill all at the same time. That does not violate HIPAA. That's not giving away any kind of patient information. And so you can report that to us in a way that honors their privacy, honors their care, but also getting us the information we need to hold them accountable.
Tell me, for someone that's unfamiliar with the work that you live and breathe every day, are there tells for like the layperson, the novice, that we can look for?
Yeah, I would say, so we have a class, Heartbeat Academy, through the Heartbeat International organization. We actually have a class for pregnancy centers and sidewalk advocates that really gets into the minutia of how to identify violations. So it's called Client Safety Advocacy. I would highly recommend taking that class. And if there's a cost barrier, we have codes that we can give out that will help. But really we get into, in a post-Roe America, we're kind of broken up into 3 categories of the states where abortion is almost completely illegal, states where abortion is fully accessible, and then the people that are kind of right in the middle. And in each of those scenarios, we're like, okay, these are the things that you need to be looking out for. So in cases where abortion is illegal, where are these women going? Are they going out of state? If they are, they're still going to be having negative experiences. Is somebody doing illegal abortion? So like just asking, who did you see? Where did you go? Like there's still ways to serve the women in their community, even if they're not obtaining an abortion in your state. And then states where it's fully accessible, we are looking at cases of human trafficking, mandatory reporting violations, zoning rules. And so it doesn't have to be an abortion specific rule, especially in places like New York, California, Illinois. We can still make cases of general medical negligence without ever touching abortion code. So really the rule is, if it feels weird, if it sounds unethical, it probably is, go ahead and let us know, and we can dig and find out what rules were actually broken. But we kind of take the philosophy, if you see something, say something, and we can just determine, did a violation occur, and what are the next steps.
I've heard you say build a narrative around the clinic and or the doctor. Can you share with us what that means?
Well, I know talking a lot with your organization, one of the things that comes up a lot is, or at least it used to be this way, that people with abortion that had abortion experiences weren't talking about that experience until 7 years later. That's changing, and you guys are seeing that firsthand. Women are coming forward a lot sooner. But even in those cases where this experience happened years ago, we still collect all that data, and we build the narrative around, how does this physician practice? Like, we have all of these stories that show us, we have a case right now in Arizona. The guy, every time he was working at the Planned Parenthood, his staff knew, we're going to have a lot of complications today because it's Dr. Richardson. And the people on the inside were kind of telling us like, he cuts corners. He's a corner cutter. Like any way that he can cut a corner, he's going to do it. It was causing all kinds of problems. And so we use that historical information to figure out, okay, how is this facility running? What are kind of their tells, how are they treating these women? And we can use that information to create a strategy and create the narrative around the facility for when we take it to the agencies.
Something that really excited me was the way you partnered with Support After Abortion to help us ask the right questions when we had that pit in the stomach feeling that something was wrong. Can you tell us a little bit about, the most important questions to have on an intake?
Yeah. Who did you see? Who was your physician and where did you go? I mean, a lot of these women have no idea who their doctors were. I mean, and that is scary to me, but who did you see? And where did you go? And did you feel seen, heard, and cared for during this process? I mean, just basic, because if their vitals were not being monitored post-care, I guarantee you they were probably sitting there going, why is no one paying attention to me? And some of the things we're hearing now too, especially with chemical abortions, is they're not being properly prepared for going home and losing their child in their bathroom and for what they're going to witness when they see that. So anything that sounds, I created a survey. I can't remember what all I put on it for your team, but it really just gets down to who did you see? Did you feel prepared? Did you have any questions that weren't answered? Did you have complications that when you called back, they said, because we're hearing now, they're not even scheduling follow-up appointments. Women are calling back with complications and they're just going, one person said, you were in and out, you're not our patient anymore, go to the ER. Like, this is not our problem, So like, did you have concerns that weren't answered? And if they're upset, you're going to get an earful. Like, they're going to tell you, they want that justice. They want to be told that what they experienced was wrong. But it's really just coming down to, who did you see? Where did you go? And how did you feel during this process? And even just asking that, stuff is going to come out about what they experienced.
Thank you so much. And what you just said is so vital to the healing journey, because acknowledging someone's story, we focus a lot on the emotional wounds of abortion, but there are sometimes physical wounds. There's a mistrust that's built up by expecting one thing and receiving another. This
is a vulnerable place to be in. I mean, you are making yourself so vulnerable to these medical practitioners that you have been taught to trust. And so when that is violated, I mean, that is really traumatic. And then when you have complications and they're not answering your questions, like it is really upsetting. I mean, I can't even imagine what a lot of these women are feeling.
I can feel your heart in that moment, and it's really touching me. I know it's got to be touching our participants in this call. So thank you so much for standing up for justice and listening to these stories and doing something with them. It's just so powerful. And the opportunity for healing is so great when we collaborate together with Reprotection. As I'm keeping one eyeball on the chat, and I see so many of you going, intake form, share it. Yes, we will share that, because Missy poured her heart into that and we just love using it. So it's been a really safe place for us. We did not have to become an expert in order to collaborate with Reprotection. We did not have to become an expert in order to collaborate with abortion survivors. And we did not have to become an expert in HG in order to help understand what it is that Michelle Lawler does with Hugs Over Ginger. So without further ado, Michelle, if you'll come on here and share with us how Hugs Over Ginger started and what is the difference between HG and morning sickness. And I'm saying HG because I'm cheating, not having to pronounce the long name.
Yes, for sure.
Yes, my name's Michelle. I'm based out of St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm in the process of fully getting off the board or off the ground and running a ministry called Hugs Over Ginger. And what it does is it supports women who have a pregnancy condition called hyperemesis gravidarum. And Kylie, to your point, when I first realized that's what I had, I started listening. I would go to Google and I would just play it, the sound, someone was saying it, just so I could learn, because it took me a minute to figure out how to say it. But basically how this whole ministry came to be for me was I got pregnant with my daughter and I was really, really sick. I was working, I couldn't work anymore. And I was like, everybody gets morning sickness, but why am I not handling this very well? And so, and everyone would give me their suggestions, and I just started thinking like, I'm just being a huge baby. Like I need to get over this. And I had a lot of guilt and shame that I was kind of not missing work and things like that. So I was like, I'm just being a baby. I'm going to power through this pregnancy. So I went up to take a shower one day and my husband found me in there crying on the ground because I literally could not move because I was so ill. And it was at that moment that I realized something was wrong. And I don't know what it is, but something is wrong. I had been to the doctor, but no one had ever mentioned to me anything about hyperemesis. It was just morning sickness and everyone has it and you'll just get through it. And I carried that through my pregnancy. So I just would tell people, I have morning sickness and they would say, oh, I had that. I just had to work through it. It was no big deal. And they would offer me remedies left and right, and none of them worked. And I carried a lot of guilt and shame with my pregnancy that I just wasn't doing a good job at it or something like that. It was after my daughter was born that I did more research and found out that there is a condition called hyperemesis. And I actually knew that that was a condition, but when you Google it, it often says, and it actually, hyperemesis gravidarum literally translates to excessive vomiting in pregnancy. And the problem with me is I didn't excessively vomit. I did vomit, but it was not excessive because some women with HG will literally vomit like 40 times a day. And that wasn't my situation. So I didn't think that's what I had, but I found a resource that said, it's not just the vomiting, but it's the feeling that you have to, so that it actually causes you to become malnourished, dehydrated, inability to eat and drink normally, inability to function. And that was me. I had all those symptoms. I lost 20 pounds with my daughter before I gained a single pound. Pregnancy, you're supposed to be gaining weight. Well, that didn't happen for me right away. So it was at that moment that I said, oh my gosh, I had HG. And how great would it have been if I had known that I had HG, because there are things you can do. There's support out there to a limited extent to help you through that situation. And so when I became pregnant with my son, I knew I was anticipating this condition because if you have it once, you're much more likely to get it again. And I was sitting there thinking, I'm thankful that I have the support that I need around me when I get sick, but how many women don't have that? They have other kids and they can't work. They can't pay their bills. Everyone's telling them they're crazy. It's in their head. And, what about those women? Who's there for those women? And that's when I said, you know what, I need to do something about that. And so I basically said to God, this is my idea. You let me know if this is something you want me to pursue. And years and years passed, like I shouldn't say years and years, but a few years passed and it just grew deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's how I decided to start the ministry. So I've officially launching it. It's right now becoming a 501c3 through my attorney. And really my goal is to not only come alongside women, but also train all of you in any way I can, support you in educating you about the condition, helping you with remedies, helping you walk alongside that woman. The biggest thing for women with hyperemesis is they just need to be heard. They need somebody to say to them, this is what you have, or this is what you could have. Go talk to your doctor, because they're just not being told. And because they're not being told, they're not getting the support they need. Hyperemesis has a much higher abortion rate than your average pregnancy, because women are so ill and it just inhibits so much of what you're able to do in your life. So, just having, like, I've seen clients and they're just like, oh, I'm not feeling well. And I just listen to their symptoms and I'm like, that sounds like HG to me. Has anyone talked to you about that? And they're just like, no, no one's brought that up to me. Are you on any medications? No, I'm not on any medications. I don't like taking medications if I don't have to, but hyperemesis, definitely I ended up having to take medications. I ended up with home health with, intravenous fluid during my pregnancy to keep out of the ER. So, there's really no known cause to it. They have identified 2 genes that they think are associated with developing HG. But, we all can be carriers of something and it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get it. So we do think there's some environmental things that can also trigger those genes to fire or not fire. And there's a whole company or organization in this country that is working towards the research end of things, but I really want to come alongside women in more of a support way and a pro-life voice as well, because in that community of HG, there is so much talk of abortion. If you join their Facebook groups, which for me were super helpful because they help you with remedies or they give you encouragement. I remember one night I was just in tears, so sick. And someone from Germany wrote me and said, I just want you to know, like, I'm thinking of you, and that helped me a lot. But at the same time, if you have a client who you say, oh, join these Facebook groups, and they even mention that they're thinking of an abortion due to their condition, these women will just say, you go do that. You need to think about yourself in this situation. And then if you even pipe in at all, I've been, messaged privately by the admins for giving any type of alternative to their idea of abortion in a kind way, of course, but they're just inundated with very abortion-minded people. So I'm hoping through my organization, I can really bring awareness to the condition as well as support the women and the organizations who are supporting them around, the country that have the condition.
That's so such a robust introduction, and I really appreciate all that you shared. We have so many people in the chat saying, spell the condition. How do you get diagnosed? But one of my favorite questions is, what's the name of your organization? Would you share with us?
Yes, I'm sorry.
That?
The name of my organization is Hugs Over Ginger. And the reason I chose that name is because hugs so H, hyperemesis, and then ginger is gravidarum, so HG. But it also means hugs over ginger, in that when a woman is suffering, especially as someone who they might be sitting in your office, the best thing you can do for them is validate them and tell them that you understand. Don't tell them they have morning sickness. Don't tell them to eat ginger, which is why I have that in my name as well. Ginger is kind of the classic remedy that people will give you when you say, I'm sick with my pregnancy. In my Facebook groups for HG, people will say, like, someone gingered me today. So it's really just offering your support, your understanding, your compassion to them over just, here's a remedy. I do think there are remedies that you can do to kind of help set yourself up for a good pregnancy the next time. But once they're in the heat of HG, you just have to really manage the symptoms and give them support. Just, I had a woman who I was messaging who had HG, and she's like, I'm going to Planned Parenthood. I just can't do this anymore. I can't. And I was, messaging her simply, you can do this. You are strong. This is temporary. And it was just, that's all she needed, was just the encouragement to keep going. You think, oh, she needs this and this. She didn't. She just needed somebody to have faith in her and understand that she was hurting and she wasn't alone.
That's incredible. How can people connect those suffering or thinking that maybe this is what their condition is? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, so you can email me. My email address, and I'll put it down here, is Michelle, MICHELLE at hugsoverginger.org. That's on my website is hugsoverginger.org. And again, I'm still launching. I have Facebook groups set up, but there's really not a lot of activity in them yet. I'm doing a lot of behind the scenes things, such as getting a care package together. I want to be able to send women boxes that are very tailored to HG. So I'm happy to help anyone who has questions, support a client that you have at this time. And yeah, website or email. I also, on my website, I have my phone number as well. But email is probably the best way to get hold of me.
That's incredible. And how healing it is to be validated in this particular type of suffering, to not have it diminished in any way as just morning sickness, just something that will be over in the first trimester, creating expectations of, a radical turnaround, just isn't helpful. So thank you so much for your work. Thank you for offering your own experience in this way. We, last but not least, have Britt Paladino. Britt is with Abiding Love Adoptions, and I want to ask her if she could share a brief introduction to Abiding Love Adoptions and what it is that makes this adoption agency radically different than anyone that you've known.
Absolutely. Like I said, my name's Brittany Paladino. I'm the PR director for Abiding Love Adoptions and Abiding Love Charities, and there's two distinctions there. One, the adoption agency is licensed in Florida, South Carolina, and Georgia. So we are licensed and able to see clients there, but there is a national charity that is a separate 501c3 that is just post-placement support for birth mothers, adoptive parents, and adoptees. And we can talk about that a little bit, but what makes us different is that we are only working with the expectant mom. And that's usually where the needle skips off the record for people, because they're like, well, wait a minute, like, well, then how does she find a family, right? So we work with trusted faith-based adoption consultants. And the reason why that works for us is, one, we can just focus on her needs, because, making an adoption plan is a journey, not necessarily just a decision. And she may place or she may not place, but when she's ready, we want her to have as much choice as possible. So working with adoption consultants means she gets more choice of families that she can select, and also she's not just depending on whoever we have as waiting families through the agency. That frees us to not have to consider taking waitlist fees and worrying about Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who's been on our waitlist for 4 years, and all well-intentioned, but how much are we going to put Mrs. Smith, Mr. and Mrs. Smith before an expectant mom? Not necessarily because she's the best match, but because we don't want Mr. and Mrs. Smith's waiting list fees to go away. So we just absolve ourselves from that conundrum entirely, and we focus solely on her. And I'm a birth mother myself. I'm almost 13 years post-placement. So to work for an agency that really is just focused on a woman like me is really important to me in my work.
You just did a terrific lead up to my next question. Tell me some language nuances that are really important for us to learn today.
Right. I think the two that you'll hear most often are, put up and give up. Those are the two things that we don't say. And I think when I explain why, it sticks a little better, because usually in your adoption training, it's like, don't say put up and don't say give up. We say place for adoption. But if you understand what the history of the language is, you might remember a little better not to use it. And the reason why we don't say put up is that actually put up is what refers to language from the orphan trains. So orphan children were put on trains and were trucked throughout the United States, not necessarily to be adopted so much as to be adopted as hired hands on farms. So these children will be put up on platforms outside of the train station to see if there were families interested in adopting them to work on their farms. And when they weren't adopted at that station, they were loaded back up on the train and then put up on another one. So that's why we don't say put up. It was a form of slavery. It is a really negative, it's a really negative thing to say. So that hopefully that will help you remember not to use put up. But give up is a little different. And from my perspective as a birth mother, this is usually what happens when people say, well, I don't know if I want to give up my baby for adoption, or she gave up her baby for adoption. And so I'll stop them and I'll say, that's interesting, but what makes you think I gave up on my daughter? And when I say it that way, I'm just sort of rephrasing it with a different connotation. It makes them stop and think. For the most part, women are in some form of an open adoption when they place. So there's not a giving up or a giving away. How I explain it is there's a role change. When before I signed her paperwork, I was her, and I still am her biological mother. Now that adoption has been finalized, I'm still her biological mother, but I'm her birth mother now. So my role in her life has changed, but my connection to her and my love for her has not changed. And so I think that's an important decision or discussion to have when we think about giving up for adoption. Like, what is she giving up? And why do you think it's like a giving away type of thing? So we say she made a placement, she's placing for adoption, she placed with another family, that type of language, because that's really actually what she did.
That's so critical and so important, especially as we see women who have experienced adoptions that weren't, I don't know what the right word would be, Brittany, maybe you can help me, something that wasn't a positive experience.
Sure.
They become abortion vulnerable because they haven't been cared for. They are not experiencing healing because they're being disregarded. And then they enter into another experience of a pregnancy. And Carrie shared with me that sometimes when they walk into that Planned Parenthood and they walk past that sign that's, cutesy, and it says abortion and is crossed out the B and the P with adoption, that even further invalidates their thinking that perhaps they could be a mother, only to be met inside a Planned Parenthood being told, you can't be a mother and you won't be able to protect your child once you give them up, for adoption.
True. So there are two things going on here. And I think now that through the Charities organization, we launched a post-placement healing program that is very much like some of the other post-abortion programs that you have. It's called SEEN. So women who have placed children for adoption and women who have experienced abortion, when they're parenting, have a lot of the same issues that come up. There's a lot of that same, I feel guilty, I feel undeserving, I'm not a good mother, I can't be a good mother, that sort of a thing that happens. So you have to consider the similarities in the two. I'm actually doing a breakout session at CareNet called The Parallels of Adoption and Abortion, because I think as a movement, we really have to discuss these things, because there's 5 times more help for women who have an experience in abortion than there are for women who have placed children for adoption. And I do want to touch on exactly what you said. So women who are entering the clinic, or sidewalk advocates who are on the sidewalk trying to get her to make another choice. Carrie and I were both on the Sidewalk Advocates podcast recently, and their purpose for having us on was, tell us how to have a better, adoption conversation with her outside the clinic. And I think they were really surprised about what we had to say, because what I said was, well, how about you don't? Right. And everything got really quiet for a minute. I'm like, you have to consider, and there are women, on this webinar who have been in this situation. What was your state of mind when you were outside the clinic? Were you open to logical, rational discussion? No, no. There are so many things firing in your brain when the one thing that isn't firing is rational thought. She's there, she is frightened. And the only thing that she's going to think at that point is, I just got to get this over with. So having a rational discussion with her about adoption is not going to work. In fact, it makes them more abortion determined. That's what the research shows. So what do we do, right? What do we do then, Britt? Here's what I've been telling my sidewalk advocates. Form better partnerships with your local pregnancy resource centers around that clinic. Get to know them. Get somebody in that, get that clinic, get that abortion, that pregnancy resource center number in your cell phone, so that when you are talking to a woman, your only job right there is to get her away from the front door. She can make another decision tomorrow, but how about today we go to this local pregnancy resource center and we talk to Betty at the clinic. Just get her away from the door. I would really love to see more pregnancy resource centers being involved in this process, rather than, I've seen the signs myself. A sign, I'll adopt your baby. Not helpful. Not helpful at all. But what is helpful is getting her to slow down, getting her away from this point of entry so that she has time to think things through. That's really the most important decision, because actually adoption is not a pregnancy choice, it's a parenting choice. So the goal for now is to just get her to carry. Does she need to make an adoption plan? I don't know, but we're going to find out as we get to know her whether or not that's something that she should consider or whether or not it's something that she is considering. And just like women who have placed, who have not had any post-placement support are very likely to have subsequent abortions because whether that experience placing for adoption was real or perceived, it's irrelevant. It was real to her. And the one thing she's going to say is, I would never do that again. She feels wrong, she feels forgotten, she feels taken advantage of. I'm on lots of Facebook, groups, and these are the stories I read about all day. They didn't care about me. All they cared about was my baby. And after the placement was, everybody forgot about me. And sometimes they did, that's just the reality. But there has to be more post-placement healing and recovery, and there has to be more options for her. Maybe she doesn't want to go to a support group, but she'd like to talk to a professional counselor online about her experience. Maybe she doesn't want professional counseling, but she wants a birth mother mentor like myself that she can call and talk to, in the parts of her own adoption journey that feel hard.
That's incredible. Well, I'm looking at the time, and I want to encourage everyone that is on this call to please collaborate with these incredible providers and organizations. Follow them, get to know them, attend other workshops that they do. There's so much to learn that will make us so much better able to care for those people that are entrusted to us. There's a beautiful intersection of healing across each of the organizations that I've shared with you today. We're grateful for your time and attention to this meeting. I want to share with you that we have launched another resource, an additional resource. We normally meet with you once a month for a free webinar, but now every week we are hosting a television show through Maria Vision, where we have men and women sharing their abortion stories, and we are talking about the need for compassion, the need for healing, and the importance of this within the church and outside the church. And I encourage you to visit our website to learn more about Maria Vision and how to watch those episodes. Melissa, Missy, Michelle, Brittany, I am so grateful for your time and generosity with today's conversation, and I look forward to seeing you all next month for our next abortion healing provider webinar. Thanks so much and have a great day.